ReZero Starting Life in Another World Volume X2, the love song of the Sword Devil, with another great cover featuring Wilhelm and Theresia. I'm such a mark for these two, it's unbelievable. Much like Volume 7, I love the simplicity of this cover, with Wilhelm looking strong, this time in the iconic yellow flower field, with Theresia blending in the background, much like she blended into Wilhelm's heart. Great characters, relevant backgrounds, simple, cool art, and I love the nice touch that this looks like a sunrise, symbolizing the beginning of Wilhelm and Theresia's relationship, which also connects to Volume 20, which is during the night, which symbolizes both of them coming to closure. Maybe I am once again looking way too much into these cover arts, but it's cool to me, damn it! Speaking of art, I also have to highlight this illustration in particular because it made me laugh out loud. To have the aggressive and edgy young Wilhelm drawn in this shoujo style with all of this glitter looks so goofy. It's such a clash between presentation and character that it just made me laugh. Now, as for the book itself, I loved it. While I did like X1, I did say in my previous video that it felt a bit like false advertising. I came in for Crucian Fairies, and while I did get some of that, I didn't get the juiciest parts I was looking forward to. And I got most of the book featuring Fourier that, while a cool character, me as a main story reader don't have much connection to him as he's not present in the main story. X2 gave me exactly what I was looking for. What was Wilhelm like when he was younger? How did he become known as the Sword Devil? What was this demi-human conflict that they keep referencing in the main story? It definitely does help that Wilhelm is one of my favorite characters, and the Astrea family plotline is one of the more interesting plotlines in ReZero to me, but still, personally, this book embodies perfectly what a side story should be. You get to know the characters better, you expand upon the world and lore of ReZero, you give a little treat to the hardcore fans while not creating a severe knowledge gap for main story readers that won't pick up this side story. This pretty much reiterates and expands upon what was already told in Volume 7, but it adds a lot of details that only the hardcore fans will care about. And as a cherry on top, it works as a great standalone book. Obviously, I won't recommend X2 as an isolated read to random people on the street because I'm not a psychopath, but it is nice to read if you're traveling like I was and you don't want to quite have to remember all of the intricate details on an arc, for example arc 4, where you have a lot of things to keep track of. This is a more casual read and that's highly appreciated. If X1 lowered my expectations a little bit, then X2 definitely raised them way back up because now I'm hyped to read X3 as that also features Wilhelm. Young Wilhelm is such a fun main character, what a journey he has. He starts off as this edgy, antisocial teenager and slowly grows up into a respectable young man. Wilhelm's earlier dialogue and worldview did remind me of those memes of, "While you were partying, I studied the blade," which got a chuckle out of me, but obviously I managed to take the book seriously despite that. Young Wilhelm is very edgy, and reading this book I couldn't help but make the constant mental comparison to older Wilhelm, who's much more stoic and more mature and very polite, so it definitely was funnier to me knowing the main story. They are definitely the same character though. Both young and older Wilhelm have a certain fierceness about them that's constant throughout the character. I hate it when series make prequels and then the younger character and older character feel like completely different characters. A person doesn't change, but a person can change. This seems like an oxymoron. What I'm saying is, a person can change their values and worldview, but the core of their personality stays the same, and this is definitely true with Wilhelm. His exaggerated edginess may also have been ridiculed in real life, but let's not forget that in context of the story, he's not even 18 for most of the book. He's an edgy teenager lashing out at the world, and he's literally fighting for his life in the middle of a civil conflict, so that would make anybody's personality a bit rougher. I like that Wilhelm's progressing maturity is related to very significant events throughout his life. He's humbled in battle, he has survivor's guilt, and he sees himself caring more and more for both his brothers in arms and, of course, Theresia. Someone who preferred isolation and rejected awards then becomes proud to be a knight and represent Lugunica. This transformation is gradual and compelling. I hate it when characters completely flip their personality because of some event that happened, and people in real life, generally speaking, don't work like that. I will say though, Wilhelm was lucky that Theresia was his kind of crazy, because his social skills leave much to be desired. This gem in particular made me laugh. Come to think of it, they do call prostitutes flower girls around here. Did you just call your loved one a prostitute? What is this, bro? Theresia doesn't make a big deal out of it, but I struggle to believe that most women, especially highborn women like Theresia, would take kindly to this type of comment, but oh well, Wilhelm still got the girl, so all's good. Maybe he isn't suited to be a playboy, but it's clear from the very beginning that he was born to be a warrior, and this is a great contrast to the main story, because Wilhelm as a protagonist is more of the typical shonen main character. Subaru, for example, is very limited in combat, so he overcomes most of his challenges through his ingenuity and his ability to gather allies, and his authority, which allows him to go back in time, but you get what I'm saying. Wilhelm is the exact opposite. He's very strong from the very beginning and seems to have an innate instinct for fighting. Right from the earlier chapters, where he still has very limited combat experience, he has the presence of mind to dodge the magic circle trap by going forward instead of retreating with the rest of the guys. There's a constant theme of being born with talent versus hard work in the Astrea family storyline, and while Wilhelm does represent the hard work side when compared to his over-talented peers, it's clear that he's much more talented than the average person. Even if Subaru were to dedicate his life to the sword like Wilhelm did, I don't think he would ever come close to the skill that Wilhelm possesses. Speaking of skill, the ending always surprised me, and this also applies to Volume 7's flashback, where I thought that by having the blessing of the Sword Saint you would be pretty much unbeatable in combat, but apparently that's not the case. Even Sword Saints have their own hierarchy, with Reinhardt clearly being at the top and Theresia being pretty strong, but at a level that a normal human, as normal as Wilhelm is, can achieve. Still, even if Theresia isn't as strong as Reinhardt, the fact that Prime Wilhelm managed to beat her is still a tremendous feat. Speaking of Theresia though, I do have a big criticism for her as a character that I hoped would be addressed in this volume, and unfortunately it wasn't. Theresia inherits the blessing of the Sword Saint, but she doesn't want it, so she doesn't fight. She proceeds to stay away from conflict while the most important people in her life, Carol and eventually Wilhelm, are very content with her doing so and even sacrifice themselves so she doesn't have to fight. When Theresia picks up the sword for the first time, it's written almost as a heroic moment, but all I'm thinking the entire time is, does no one resent Theresia? If we really think about it, Theresia is a deeply selfish character, and I was hoping that the book would go into this, seeing that the main story didn't have the time or inclination to do so, but it's like the book actively avoids that subject. We get brief mentions like Theresia staying away from her house to avoid people bothering her to pick up a sword, and maybe I'm misinterpreting this, but it's written almost like, oh no, those meanies want Theresia to use her skills to their advantage, and I'm like, yeah. Theresia to me is not kind. She's self-centered and conflict-averse. I can't believe it took the boy she was in love with to be in danger for her to finally pick up a sword. So many casualties on both sides of the conflict could have been avoided if only Theresia got out of the couch a bit sooner, so I have a very hard time empathizing with Theresia, and the book didn't really address this issue at all. If anything, my view of her as a character is even worse now, because we see how gruesome the demi-human conflict is, and the whole time Theresia is just there, flower gazing. I don't think this obvious character flaw will ever be addressed, seeing as X3 will go into Wilhelm as he is older, and Theresia, I guess, is just a retired stay-at-home flower girl or something, but I think it's a big missed opportunity for a compelling and interesting character reflection. And once again, I think this parallels the main story, where the author also seems to love Emilia as this cute, ineffectual, can-do-nothing-wrong type character, and I sincerely hope that she does have some breakthrough as a character. Emilia cannot rely on Subaru as Theresia relied on Wilhelm, at least in the strictly speaking combat sense, so I do hope that Emilia grows as a character and does not follow on Theresia's footsteps of being this precious little angel whose flaws are always ignored. I really enjoyed the secondary characters in this volume, but to me the one that stood out the most is Roswaalina, the female Roswaal. This version of Roswaal is hilarious, and it's even better if you read X2 after Arc 4, because then you know it's Roswaal, it's the clown pervert, you know, it's the same guy. There was a very subtle plot point of female Roswaal actually liking Wilhelm in a romantic sense, which was interesting, but much like everything surrounding Roswaal, we never did understand if it was actually real or if it was just Roswaal stirring the pot as he usually does. It's a nice touch that back in Arc 4, Roswaal was happy for Wilhelm defeating the White Whale, so it shows that he does have some degree of affection and respect for Wilhelm, which is very peculiar for his character, seeing as he only cares about himself, Echidna, and Ram. Now, was he romantically attracted to Wilhelm in the female body? I guess we'll never know. Maybe he just wanted those strong genes for the next generation. Now that's a Roswaal thought process. There was a point in the book where the characters are surrounded by zombies and I kept thinking, why doesn't Roswaal just simply AoE burn these guys? What is wrong with this clown? And then the reveal came. This generation of Roswaal has no talent for magic, and I laughed hard. The visual of Roswaal going around as a monk type character punching people and using some sort of baseball as his ranged attacks, it was so funny, and also a great callback to when he literally punched a hole in Garfield. This does raise the question though, if Roswaalina couldn't use magic, then how did he use the soul transfer magic to hop on to the next generation? I guess we'll never know. As for Grimm, I also really enjoyed his character, and thematically speaking, I really like the Shielder class. But it must be said, it was funny in a dark way how once Wilhelm was maturing and no longer needed a foil like Grimm to contrast with his character, the author was just like, and you Grimm, you do not get to speak again. The ReZero author is kind of cruel sometimes. Once again, there's a slight contrast with the main story, because Wilhelm cannot go back in time like Subaru can. Character loss is much more impactful, and actions have much more everlasting consequences, which makes the stakes higher and the reading more interesting. One final thing to mention is that I loved the continuity between X1 and X2, despite them featuring different characters and being decades apart. Leap Bariel is once again introduced in a slightly bigger role from X1, and we do in fact confirm that he is highly suspect and not a good guy, so I'm looking forward to getting his story probably when we get to Priscilla. We also see the use of the Sacrament of the Immortal King once again, which is very interesting by it being featured in X1, X2, and possibly being used in Arc 5. I can't help but think that down the line on the main story, we're going to have a very big zombie showdown and it's going to be very cool. And this is a very tiny detail, but Wilhelm at one point says that you must train 3 times as harder for every rest day, and this is something that is also said by Krush to Fourier in X1. I love when the worlds have all of these little sayings. It makes the world feel alive and like it has its own identity. Overall, I can't help but praise X2. I love this book, and despite the cheesy romantic dialogue, I was still very much invested in the characters and in the past of the kingdom of Lugunica. And this was it for me today. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Bye bye.